Okay, do it here, yeah. Now, I can give you the summary of my talk now, because what I want to convince you is that, thank you, what I want to convince is that, of course, science has to be in contact with politics to get the resources. But what I want to show you is that science can give, in the reverse way, give back many benefits back to policy on all kinds of levels. And the main outcome, the main product which can be given back is confidence. I think all the contracts which are being signed by countries are not worth the paper if they are not based on a minimum of confidence, because there's no international police, no court which can ensure all the contract. So confidence, I think, in politics is essentially. And that can be achieved by bringing people together, teach them how to talk to each other and how to listen to each other, and not only scientists. Scientists are reasonable, they can do it, but also politicians and other people. So my main talk will be to show you that these are not only words, but these can be done in practice. So I will give you examples later. But allow me to just to mention, yesterday I came back from Vienna, where there's a fantastic exhibition about Peter Bruegel's work, and one of his famous paintings is the Tower of Babel. And I was fascinated by it, because that apparently was the first international big project which was organized in mankind. And I think Bruegel wanted to use most of his paintings to show also the difficulties in society. And in that painting he wanted to show the difficulties in relations between political powers and science. Because apparently it's quite clear that this apparently must have been an accelerator they wanted to build, a particle accelerator, and I think it looks like a cyclotron. But you see what happens sometimes in life. Before they finished the project, they run out of money. So what happens is, and you have to look at Bruegel's paintings quite carefully. You have to look down here in this area, and I enlarged it, and you see here the king or emperor or whoever it was of the symbol of political power, and here are the physicists and engineers on their knees asking for more money. Now, this relation between politics and science still exists, but my point is it goes also the other way around. I think what has changed now, I think politics can now benefit also from science. And I said already, I think confidence building is the most important result, bringing people together. Now, you have heard so much about CERN. Let me come back to CERN for a moment again. And what has been forgotten most of the time, and people don't know it anymore, that the foundation of CERN was based on two initiatives. One initiative came from these physicists, from scientists, who realized in order to be competitive, in particular with the US at that time, one had to join the European forces. But what is very little known or forgotten is there was a second initiative which came from the politicians. And there was in particular a Swiss political man, de Rougemont, who after the war invited the politicians to a meeting at Lausanne in 1959, I think it was, where for the first time politicians from France, England and Germany, for the first time the German politicians were invited. I think there were also Belgian politicians there, and they discussed what can one do to bring countries together, working peacefully together again. And they said, well, scientists are reasonable people, so why not create a scientific organization? And these two initiatives came together under UNESCO under the Fifth General Conference in 1950, where then also Elinor Rami from America came in, and they made a proposal to UNESCO to create CERN, and CERN was founded. And that was the origin of what I would call the third spirit and the third model. To use excellent science, but not only for itself to do science, but also use it as a tool to bring people and nations together. Now, and CERN was, I think, well, for a long time, the only scientific organization which has in its constitutions both stars. You have heard all about CERN, so I can skip all that. And let me give you just a few practical examples. How did CERN help policy in a way? And you will forgive me, I've asked your understanding, that I use examples which I know best, of course. But there certainly are many other examples from CERN, but also maybe from other collaborations, which go more or less in the same direction. Let me mention just a few cases. Well, during the hottest part of the Cold War, when no Western organization or government was prepared to sign any contract with the Soviet Union, CERN was the only organization which in 1966, I think it was, signed an agreement with the Soviet Union to a collaboration with their institute at Serpukhov. Then later, an agreement was signed between CERN and Dumna, the international organization of the Warsaw Pact. I was learned later that these contracts or these agreements, which were on the purely scientific level, used as templates for similar contracts between the Soviet Union and the United States, and these in turn were used as templates for agreements on the presidential level. So it's an example where you can build up confidence from the purely scientific level up to the highest political levels. Let me tell you another story, another event. There was in 1985 the Brezhnev, what was it? The Reagan-Gorbachev meeting in Geneva for the disarmament contracts. And of course, these presidential meetings are prepared by the so-called Sherpas. These are experts, and disarmament has to do with nuclear physics. So this meeting was prepared by physicists. And one evening, the leader of the American delegation was Trivial Peace, plasma physicist, called me and said, look, we don't make any progress. In these official meetings, we cannot talk freely. We need a place where we can talk freely, a place which is estimated by both sides here, where we are sure that there are no microphones. Could you do something? I said, well, I invite you to dinner. So I invited them, and the people who know CERN, it's a famous glass box in Restaurant 1. So there was a dinner in glass box Restaurant 1. I left it there, I disappeared. The next day they called me and said, look, there we had really the possibility to speak freely. We could solve all the problems. So perhaps without the glass blocks of CERN, this disarmament agreement would not have been signed. Well, another example is making it possible for people from different countries in unfriendly relations to work together. So at CERN it was possible that for the first time physicists from People's Republic of China and Taiwan were working together in the same experiment, which nowadays is trivial. But at that time it required the personal agreement of downbending. And last example, to help dissidents. There are many examples. More recent one I could give you also from Sesame. Let me just mention the Orlov case. I don't know whether you remember him. Orlov was in the 1980s, was a dissident, wanted to leave Soviet Union, couldn't get out. And there were it was not as prominent as Sakharov, but still there were many demonstrations in the West in his favor, but nothing happened. And also the CERN staff said, look, we must make some demonstration. So I said, okay, wait. So next time I came to the Soviet Union to discuss the collaboration with CERN, I met a minister, and they told not mentioning any political problems. I told him, look, there is Mr. Orlov, a very good physicist. From the scientific point of view, it's very important that he comes to CERN. We need him at CERN for our collaboration. I told him, if you don't allow him to come, we must interpret that you're not interested anymore in a collaboration with CERN. He told me, well, that's a difficult problem. It's beyond my level. It's a level of head of states, but I'll see what I can do. What happened 6 months later, Orlov came without any noise, not noticed by the media and so on, stayed 6 months at CERN and then went later to the United States. I mean, in this kind of government, of course, for them it's important not to lose face. They must have an excuse for a decision to say, oh, it was not done for political reasons, but for scientific reasons. So I could give you several other cases of that. So, as I said, I think it's important now that we realize that benefits can be transferred from science to politics, and fortunately, this is more and more recognized now also from the political side. I mean, the Director General of CERN or its delegates or advisors are invited now regularly to committees at the UN, at the EC here in Brussels, or even the economists with the World Economic Forum at Davos is now inviting regularly CERN to participate in their meetings. And I can tell you last month, or in October this year, there was a meeting in Geneva. There is what's called the International Parliamentary Union. It's a union which unifies or brings together not only government representatives but parliamentarians. In October, they had organized a special meeting together with CERN to learn how they could transfer values from science to politics. Now, let me come to another example. It's Sesame. Sesame is a child of CERN, was born in this CERN spirit, is a center, a light source, an international center in Jordan, in the Middle East, and is the first center in Muslim territories. When it was started, I insisted that we don't need an abbreviation which has no meaning. Nobody knows anymore what CERN means. It doesn't matter. CERN is a signal of quality. But I thought it would be better to have a name here which has an emotional meaning both in the Western world and also the Arab world. And somebody suggested Sesame, which is known by everybody from the fairy tales of Thousand and One Nights, and is the magic word for door opener. So that's why it was called Sesame. Forget what Sesame stands for. Now, the beginning of Sesame was, again, CERN's coming in all the time, was organized by an Italian theorist, Sergio Fubini, who organized workshops to bring together at that time particular Israelis and Egyptian scientists. So it was a workshop for Middle East cooperation. And in these workshops it was suggested, why not to install an international collaboration in the CERN spirit in the Middle East. Well, they said, I had retired as Director General of CERN at that time. They said, look, you have time, nothing to do. Why don't you come in and take care of that? So I said, well, maybe let's try. But in this difficult diplomatic and political situation there, it would only work if we repeat the foundation of CERN, which means it has to be done under the umbrella of UNESCO. So I wrote a letter to Frédéric Mayor, who at that time was Director General of CERN. He immediately jumped on it. He was immediately enthusiastic about it. He invited all the governments in the Mediterranean area for a meeting in Paris, and there it was decided to set up an interim council to start such an organization. I warn you, when you make suggestions, that might end that you have to do some work. So however, establishing an international organization under the umbrella of UNESCO is not so simple. It takes usually 4 to 6 years because it has to be approved by the General Assembly of UNESCO, where there are more than 190 countries, and they meet only every 2 years. But we managed to convince them that the project couldn't wait as long, so they transferred the power to take the final decision and agreed to a constitution to the so-called executive committee, which still has 50 countries, but they are meeting every year. So so these things went relatively fast. So in May 2002, they took a decision to set up such a facility, an organization, and they said in their decision, they said, this is a quintessential UNESCO project combining capacity building and vital peace building through science. And they also added, this is a model project for other regions. So, fine, but then of course one difficulty was, well, where should the site be? And the conditions for the site, well, again, I should say the statutes of Sesame, I copied the CERN convention. It's almost literally the same, some minor changes. So according to the CERN idea, again, the idea was, of course, that independent of all political problems, every scientist of the world should be able to work in this facility. That was one condition for the host state. The second one was they should provide the land and they should pay for the building, and that, as like at CERN, the territory should become, should receive diplomatic immunity. So I traveled at that time, traveled around with Assistant Director General of UNESCO, Yacarino, his name here. We visited several countries and presented these conditions, which of course cut out immediately some countries. Israel said immediately they cannot guarantee that, some other countries also. So we traveled around and it looked very bad. Finally we came to Jordan, had an official meeting there, again nothing came out. So I was already desperate. I thought the project would not fly because we cannot find a site. But I remembered I had a student, a Jordanian student, and I called him, his name was Isa Kubeis. I called him and said, Isa, we don't get anywhere. Could you do something? I said, yes, I invite you to dinner tonight. He got his PhD in Germany, but in the meantime he had become president of one of the universities in Jordan. So we had dinner in his home, and dinner was almost over. At 10 o'clock, suddenly another gentleman came in, looked like an American in his jogging suit, came from jogging. But it turned out it was one of the royal princes. And we explained to him what our idea was. He got interested. He disappeared with his handy on the terrace. He came back and said, tomorrow at 10 o'clock we have an audience with His Majesty. Then we met the prince there, this prince here, Prince Razi is his name, but he was not only the scientific advisor to the king, but also the link man to the Bedouins. So he told me, when you will see me there, I have to appear like a Bedouin, so you don't recognize him there. But apparently he had briefed the king. So we discussed that. We said, look, these are the conditions. Every scientist must be able to get into the laboratory, and you have to pay for that. I said, would you agree to that? He said, yes. I said, can I have that in writing? He said, yes. So half an hour later, I had a letter from him signed that he agreed to these conditions. If you read the official papers of Sesame, you will find nothing about that. The paper said there was a complicated vote and whatever, it's all nonsense. So you see, decisions are really not taken in the official meetings, but somewhere else. Okay, so here then is the result. The member states are, of course, Jordan, who is a host state, and Israel was essential, Palestine, Egypt, and then Iran and Pakistan. So Israel and Iran together is one thing, but there's also Turkey and Cyprus, the Greek part of Cyprus. I think Sesame is also the only place where Turkey and Cyprus are represented here. And as I said, the Constitution of Sesame is a copy of the CERN Constitution. So in the Council of Sesame, each country has 2 delegates, a government representatives and a scientist. So there are government representatives of Israel and Iran sitting around the same table, and of Turkey and Cyprus. Okay, the site of the laboratory is north of Amman. Here you see Amman. Here's the Jordan Valley, the Dead Sea. Here's Palestine. And let me tell you a story. Sesame is no opener. When we discussed it with the Israelis, there's the people in Beersheba, big research center somewhere down here. We asked them, are you interested to use this facility? The biologist said, yes, provided we can go there by car, because some of our specimens have a lifetime only a few hours. And he said, you have to make sure that we can go by car using the Allenby Bridge here, King Hussein Bridge here, because otherwise we would have to make a big detour which would take too long. That you have to make sure that this bridge is open for us. So after some negotiations, both with Jordan and Israel, it was decided that this bridge is open for people coming to Sesame, working there. So the Israelis indeed come now via this bridge. So you see, Sesame has really become a door opener. Okay, to cut it short, after all these negotiations, and in 2003, the ground was broken for the building in the presence of Mr. Matsura, the DG of UNESCO at the time, who did, I don't have the time to tell you all the story, did a lot to help the project, and again, the king. And then after a few years, the building was finished in 2008. Then happened a big disaster. The building was a copy of a similar building at Karlsruhe, where they have a similar machine. And I thought a building which is good in Karlsruhe would also be good for Jordan. No, in Jordan there was a heavy snowfall, and the roof did not stand the snowfall, the roof came down. So the roof had to be repaired, a new roof had to be done, so it looks like that now, like that. Well, the facility, I don't have to go into the site part, is a light source, electrons running around in a magnetic ring, emitting synchrotron radiation, and you get radiation from all wavelengths, from the infrared to the short X-rays, and you can use these for all kind of investigations, from life sciences, material science, with even cultural heritage. Now, from the beginning, we thought it was very important to have training, a users group working there. So we started very early to have setting up user group. And here you see the first meeting we had in 2003 was financed, in fact, by Japan. And here you see an Israeli next to an Iranian, Pakistani, and so on. So it works quite well. I do not have the time to talk about all the difficulties which we had. And last year there was a formal inauguration of the facility, again in the presence of the king and Princess Sumaya, who is now scientific advisor to the king, and all the official delegates. Now, from the beginning, the chairs of the chair of the council was always taken by former director general. So that has become a new job for retired director generals. Now, I am asked very often, how is it possible that this thing works in that political environment? Did you have political problems? And I must say almost none. The only political problem we had concerned in the constitution is the name of Palestine, because Israel said Palestine is not recognized by Israel as a country, so we are not allowed to talk about member states, we must speak only about members. And the question was, how should Palestine mentioned in the constitution? That took a long time. I had to meet Arafat himself, who was alive at that time, and discuss it with him. And finally, a solution was found, which was also accepted by the Israelis. It's called, in the constitution, it's called PLO, on behalf of Palestinian authorities. The other political problem, which unfortunately was not solved so far, is that Saudi Arabia refused. We had long discussion with Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states, and there the answer was a very interesting facility, but as long as there's no peace between Israel and Palestinians, we cannot join. Let's hope that might change in the future. Of course, there were all kinds of practical problems, financial problems. For instance, Iran could not pay its contribution for several years now, not because they do not want to pay, but they cannot because no Western bank would accept payment by Iranian bank. And some other countries like Cyprus and Egypt had this financial crisis. So one of the problems we have now is that the operation funds are too short, so the machine is not fully used. There are only 3 of the possible beams in operation, and well, we have to live with that. But the future, I think, is that Sesame will become not only a synchrotron radiation source, but a meeting place for other projects in the area. They're building a guest house now, and there will be a congress center will be built, and they're already now discussing the meetings there on other things like water and food and so on. If I have still 3 minutes or so, let me mention another project. I mean, I took serious the advice from the UNESCO Executive Committee, which said that Sesame should be a model project for other regions. So in 2062 years ago, I made a proposal to create a similar organization, again following the CERN example, in Southeast Europe. Why Southeast Europe? Well, I think it's a region which also needs scientific and technological development. It needs a better collaboration between countries because it's only 10 years that they had the Kosovo War and other frictions. And on the other hand, there is a preparedness of the EU to help this area in general. So we had discussions, but I was very disappointed. Not much happened. There was no interest. And then CERN comes in again. By chance, I met a charming young lady at CERN, and it turned out she was not only a physicist at CERN, she was also the science minister of Montenegro. And I explained to her what the idea was, and having learned what international organization collaboration means, she immediately picked it up. She convinced the Prime Minister of Montenegro, and the whole thing started. And again, to cut it short, a year ago, there was a meeting at CERN, and CERN was again crucial as a neutral, politically neutral place. We had a meeting where the science ministers of the countries there in the region signed a declaration of intent, and that was the first step to make that project a real regional project, not only just Montenegro project. It was decided there also to set up a steering committee which would take care of it. Here you see the map of all the countries which have signed this thing. And you see it's amusing, and sometimes things are repeating. In Israel, with Sesame, we had the problem that Palestine was not recognized as a country. We were not allowed to talk about member states. The same is happening here now. Kosovo is not recognized by Serbia as a country, so again, we are not allowed to talk about member states. But I can tell you, at that meeting at CERN, the minister of Serbia and the minister of Kosovo were sitting peacefully at the same table discussing this project. Now, two committees had worked out two proposals. The question is, of course, what should this facility be? Had worked out two proposals, and there were two suggestions. One was to, again, like Sesame, build a synchrotron radiation source, fourth generation synchrotron source, and another suggestion was to use a facility for tumor therapy and use it also for biomedical research with heavy ions, with protons and heavy ions. Now this was accepted in principle, but then what happened of this steering committee which I mentioned, which was set up at the meeting at CERN, had a few days meeting after that meeting at ICTP, and we were invited by the president of Bulgaria. Bulgaria had the presidency of EU at that time. And the president of Bulgaria was enthusiastic about it. He said, excellent project. I will make sure that it gets on the roadmap of the EU as long as we have the presidency. But he said the condition is you must choose between the two facilities. So we did our best. And believe it or not, within a month, we got a unanimous decision from all the countries involved that in favor of the second possibility, a facility for tumor therapy and biomedical research. So, what are the next steps? Well, we got very positive reactions here in Brussels from EU, thanks to Commissioner Moedas and his Director General, Jan Smith, and now Mr. Paquet, who are prepared to give us immediately some money to keep the momentum of the project. And I suggested to set up a preparatory group at CERN to prepare the next step. I mean, CERN has a certain tradition in that. Probably you don't know that the ESO, the European Southern Observatory, and also AMBL were set up at CERN. CERN was a midwife when they were founded. So I hope, well, CERN is prepared now to play again the midwife for this new facility. Well, we'll see. I mean, I think the chances, the political chances are perhaps 50% that it will work because the countries, the friction between these countries is still very big. We'll see. So let me conclude by saying I find it still very gratifying that in a time when there's still so much friction and even hatred and violence between countries going on, that at least for scientific projects, discussions are going on, and not only between scientists, that's not a problem, but on the political level. And I think that is a small light in dark times. Look, I am thinking also sometimes, what is the legacy of all that, of CERN and its babies in a few hundred years? And of course, in a few hundred years, there will be no written evidence about CERN. Since we don't use clay tablets, all our present digital storage will not work anymore in a few hundred years. So all written evidence about all these activities will be lost. So archaeologists will make excavations, and they will find a tunnel. And they will be surprised. There's a 27-kilometer tunnel with a fantastic, precise geometry, with a beautiful symmetry. So they will speculate, what was it for? Was it for workshops like Stonehenge? Will say, no, these people at that time were not so religious. So I think the conclusion would be it was a political symbol for the unity of Europe. And that, I think, will not be too bad, I guess. Thank you.